Um, I remember my first automobile. My sister and I were in school, and we'd heard from an uncle who lived up past Healdsburg in Geyserville that he was coming down with his new Oldsmobile. Or was it a Hupmobile? I think it was an Oldsmobile. And he would bring us home. We had to walk about a mile on the country road and then cut through our hop fields to get home. It was a full 2-mile walk, but we didn't mind it. Always took off our shoes the minute we got into the hop field and walked through the hop field barefoot. And so Uncle Charlie had written or something, I don't remember whether we had a phone at that time or not, but we had got the word that Uncle Charlie would come to school and pick us up and bring us home. Well, it was a funny little car with no front seats, no front doors, And he had to go way around to keep on the road. He couldn't cut through the hop fields. So it was about maybe a 3-mile ride before we got home. Frances and I were both shaking like leaves when we got out of that car. It was really quite a sensation.
Was it noisy?
Very noisy and very shaky. You shook like this when you rode in that car. I think maybe I was 10 years old.
Did it drive on the road for the wagons?
Oh yes, of course. There were no paved roads. It just drove right along, and if you met a man with a horse, the horse probably shied and jumped and gave the driver a very bad time. But I remember another incident with an automobile. My grandmother lived in Calistoga, which was, you probably know where Calistoga is from here. And we used to drive over there with our horses and wagons. And when I was about 5 or 6, my father and mother, and my grandmother, my father's mother, my sister, and my little brother Mervyn were going over to the 4th of July celebration in Calistoga. And I had on a red striped dress that I was pretty proud of, and I had a big straw hat with ribbons hanging down the back that matched it. And we got on that Marquess grade, which at that time was impassable. If you met somebody had to back and get to one of the turnout places on it. Now you can pass on it, although it's still a pretty much of a grade. And it was this side of Marquess Springs that we heard a car come chugging around the corner. And there was no place to turn. We were stopped right in the middle of the road, and the car came around the turn, and the horses started to really perform. One of the horses was a pretty fractious horse. We were in a spring wagon with no top, 2 seats. Seats in the front and seats in the back. And this team, Father was an excellent driver. He could do anything with a horse. But Buck and Kaiser were the 2 buckskin horses, and they were pretty fancy horses. And Buck was really cavorting. And the man in the automobile sat there just stunned. He didn't know what to do. My father shouted at him, blank, 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 shut that damn thing off. And man said, I can't. I don't think I can get it started again. And Dad said, well, you'll shut it off or else. By that time, Buck had done enough prancing that he was over the grade. And the car was teetering. We children and all of us had gotten out of the car, the wagon by that time, and were huddled back against the bank, except my grandmother and my mother. They were hanging on to the back wheels of the spring wagon to try to keep it from being pulled clear over the bank. And Buck was he'd gotten his head under some part of the harness, I don't know what. And there was Dad at the head of the horses trying to calm them. And the man in the car said, well, you could cut the tugs. You could cut the tugs and get him back. Dad said, you blankety blank fool, if I cut the tugs, how am I going to drive home? Tugs for what, pull the wagon, And so anyway, my father finally got the fractious horse back on the road, and the man in the car had the back some distance around the curve to get to a turnout place. But he cranked his car up and got it out. And I saw that my grandmother was hanging onto the wheels of that car with my straw hat crushed in her hand. She had picked it up when it flew off my head, and she didn't know she had it. And here she was clutching the back of these wheels, and my straw hat was crushed to pieces. But we went on to the 4th of July celebration and had a big time.